I'm going to start with a hot take, and it's going to make sense further in the video. Belal Muhammad will be a more entertaining champion than Leon Edwards was. I know it sounds crazy, and it's, coming from me, someone who's been calling Belal Muhammad a boring fighter for many, many years. Why do I say this? Because Belal at least fights hard and shows urgency, pushing a pace against his opponents. Leon does none of that. He fights slow-paced, has no urgency if he's losing a fight, and always looks like he could fight harder, but just doesn't. Leon fights like he's hitting pads, trying to stay perfect with his technique, fights by a training rhythm, and sometimes to throw a cool combo like the 1-2 high kick. That's the rhythm and the pace that he fights at. And in fact, it goes to show, if you watch his pad work, he might be the best pad hitter in the entire UFC. There's no coincidence about it. This is why Leon Edwards is the most frustrating fighter that I have ever watched in MMA. His technique and skills are so clean. He's so talented. He has all the attributes of a perfect fighter. He has like the perfect body for fighting and the skills to match, but the way he uses his skills is so frustrating. Leon has amazing skills to be a truly great fighter, but the approach he takes is so mind-boggling boring to watch and always causes his fights to become close on a decision, whether he wins or loses, or closer than it needs to be. An emphasis on decision. Since that's how 90% of his fights go, most of the fans in the sport did not care about Leon Edwards too much before he beat Kamaru Usman. In fact, back then, there were a lot of fans that didn't even want to see him fight for the title. The reason why so many people didn't like Leon back then was because of his fighting style. He was always this kind of fighter throughout his entire career. But the Usman head kick completely changed the narrative of Leon into something that wasn't necessarily true. Now, he could have carried that forward, with the head kick. If he became more aggressive in the third Usman fight, was more aggressive in the Colby fight, and now here against Belal, we would have been talking about how Leon changed his style and became a much more exciting fighter. But what really happened was Leon fought like a point fighter all the way up to the Usman knockout, and then after that continued the same point fighting style and never changed. And that's the thing about when people call Leon a sniper that can knock you out with the perfect shot. But snipers don't let their wounded enemy walk off without the kill shot. Leon has always been a point fighter. He's always been a point fighter after his second UFC fight when he knocked out Seth Pakinski, a point fighter who will occasionally catch his opponent with a well-timed shot and hurts them, but they usually survive because Leon lets them. A sniper doesn't let his wounded opponent survive, right? Examples of snipers are guys like Anderson Silva or Israel Adesanya. Yes, Izzy was boring as well, but that was because of his opponents didn't want to engage him. If they did, they would walk into the scope. The only one who didn't was Strickland because he fought a perfect game plan and Pereira survived the first fight. But if Adesanya hurt his opponent, the fight was usually over, or like against Kelvin, he will try his hardest to finish. Every other opponent he hurt, they didn't survive. But when Leon hurts his opponent, there's a high likelihood they will survive. And of course, we don't have to mention how Anderson was a sniper. But why is Leon so boring? Why does he fight this way? He doesn't really have any primal sense of battle. He doesn't have that killer instinct. He just tries to perfect his technique and just use that. Even when he's down on the scorecards, he usually doesn't change anything. He doesn't usually try to get a finish when he needs one. The only time we've seen something like this out of him was against Usman with that knockout, which he rode off on the coattails for the rest of his career. It was the only time he did something that the fans appreciated ever. Even when he had that long win streak, which in itself was very impressive, the fans didn't really care as much. The highlights of Leon's career also include Nate Diaz nearly TKOing him in a fight that he was dominating, and now Belal slamming him on his head. Those are the three highlight moments of Leon Edwards' career that everyone will remember. Head kicking Usman, Nate almost finishing him, and Belal slamming him on his head. And the reason for that is so many of his other fights have been so incredibly boring to watch that people forget what even happened in those fights. A lot of people don't even remember the third Usman fight, exactly what happened besides him grabbing the cage. A lot of people don't remember like the sequences in the Colby fight, except the time he took him down and Colby just didn't look good. A lot of people don't remember all the stuff he did to Nate Diaz before he almost got finished. That like wiped the fight away from so many fans' minds, or the stuff he did against Gunnar Nelson, or the stuff he did against Brian Barberino back in the day, because these weren't key defining moments of his career, right? Even the first Belal fight, we remember him being aggressive and landing a head kick at times, but those are not the highlights of his career. Leon's win streak was commendable, winning the title, beating Usman twice, although the second time he beat Usman wasn't the same fighter. He did beat Colby, but Colby also wasn't the same guy. Leon did great things, of course, but now Belal exposed the reality of Leon's legacy. Why is that? Why is everybody finally coming to this understanding of Leon? Because he finally lost. Leon has not lost in a very, very long time before this. He was undefeated for 8.5 years. And in this sport, fans don't really want to hear criticism of fighters who consistently win, especially if they are champions. So when I mentioned before that Leon is a point fighter, and that his wins against Usman and Colby aren't as great as people think they are, and that he was never an entertaining fighter who also has questionable fight IQ, fans don't want to hear it because he is still winning. But it's the truth, and it's always been the truth about Leon. Now, Leon can change his style after that loss to Belal if he fights Ian Gary, which makes a lot of sense and would be an interesting fight. Hopefully, he shows more urgency if he needs to, right? If like Ian Gary's beating him somehow, which I don't think he will. I think Leon should be able to get that win against Ian Gary. And even his coach, Leon's coach, was saying that Ian Gary is a good next matchup for Leon Edwards. But overall, Leon's skill is way too high level to be fighting the way that he fights. He could be doing so much better in his fights if he just pushed a harder pace, went for the knockout more. It wasn't so passive in his fights. He's so like absent in exchanges. Every time I see him fight, I just think of like he's hitting pads or like he's training. No, I don't want to make this all about Leon Edwards because it will make it seem like I'm not giving credit to Belal Muhammad, which I did already, you know. Belal, of course, way better than we expected. Very strong wrestler. He is developing a similar aesthetic style to Khabib, fighting off the jab very well like Khabib did. Khabib's best punch was probably his jab. Strong takedowns, good control on top. Is he on the level of Khabib? No, but his aesthetic, like the way that he fights, is mimicking a lot of what Khabib used to do, and it's because Belal is training with Khabib. In fact, he said that Khabib developed a game plan to defeat Leon Edwards for him, or at least help doing so. So the welterweight division may have found their own version of Khabib Nurmagomedov in Belal Muhammad, who's stronger than ever, he's more technical than ever, he's a smarter fighter than ever. There are still some like holes in like his boxing and stuff, and maybe a bit of his control on the ground. The fact that Leon was able to reverse him a few times throughout their fight. There are some like patches that Belal should do. I mean, that's for every fighter, right? Most performances are not going to be flawless, you know, so Belal is probably going to get better after this. Khabib is going to absolutely show him where he made mistakes, and the next time we see Belal Muhammad, he's probably going to be even harder to defeat if he goes up against someone like Shavkat, for an example, which I think is the next matchup for him, the one that makes the most sense at least. And Shavkat on paper has the most dangerous style for Belal Muhammad. This is the toughest fight of Belal's entire career, and if he can get past Shavkat, I don't know who beats Belal before he gets too old, you know, because he is 36, so he's got to rack up these title defenses very, very quickly if he can. No waiting around for Belal. We need an active champion in the welterweight division. Besides Usman, this division's champions throughout its entire history have mostly been inactive, from GSP to Tyron Woodley to Leon Edwards. Hopefully Belal can fight another time this year. That would be great. But I don't know if you guys heard about the excuses from Leon Edwards. His coach, well, he gave an excuse and then his coach gave an excuse, and they're probably valid. So Leon said that he was tired, most likely because of the time that they fought. It was like 5 in the morning, which catered to Belal Muhammad coming from the United States. And then Leon's coach said that Leon had a back injury going into the fight, so he wasn't able to train wrestling that much. I don't like hearing these excuses, man, because every fighter is injured. I'm pretty sure Belal went in there injured too. He's just not talking about it. It's always the fighter that loses that has the excuses. But I'm pretty sure Belal Muhammad also went into that fight injured in some way. I mean, these guys are going through a rigorous training camp that most people on the planet cannot go through, right? Their bodies are getting trained to the brink of breaking down. It's only logical that these guys aren't going to be 100% in their fight. And that's one thing why I don't like to hear fighters make excuses like that. Oh, I lost because my back was hurting. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure your opponent's back was hurting too, man. I'm pretty sure not just his back, I'm pretty sure every part of him was hurting. That's why it's always good to just look at fighters as if all of them are going into a fight injured in some way. That's how all these excuses that come out, it's just souring the fight, you know? So Leon's coach definitely has to bring Leon in to progress his skills, maybe get him to try to finish fights a little bit more or get more aggressive at times. But killer instinct is not something you could teach a fighter. They have it or they don't. Leon has amazing skills all throughout, right? He's a very well-rounded fighter. Good kicks, decent wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, good in the clinch, great elbows and knees. Like, the guy's solid, but he doesn't go for the finish. He doesn't have that killer instinct. And you have a guy like Tom Aspinall, for an example. Tom Aspinall and like Dricus du Plessis, maybe like Islam Makhachev, like these guys have killer instinct, especially Aspinall. Just like Aspinall said, if he has you hurt, you're done. You're gonna get finished. You're gonna get choked out or TKO'd. And you see that in the amount of finishes this guy has in the first round. But with Leon, it's like he slashes Belal Muhammad with a nasty elbow and then just looks to control on top. Like, he doesn't even go for the finish at all. He landed a few elbows, literally like 2 seconds left in the fight. But what was all that inactivity right before that? From the first elbow that cut Belal to him landing a few more elbows at the end of the fight. Why didn't he do anything in between that? And he knew he was losing because his coach was giving him the speech. He straight up told Leon, yo, you want me to stop this fight for you? Imagine hearing those words fighting Belal Muhammad, the guy that you completely underestimated, that your coach is telling you, hey, I'm going to stop this fight. I'm going to throw in the towel for you, man, if you're not going to go out there and finish this guy. He should have gotten amped once he heard his coach telling him that, but nothing. Like, he landed an elbow and that was pretty much it. Barely did anything with it. It was the most impactful thing he did in the entire fight, and he didn't build upon it when he absolutely could have. And Leon's in his prime, right? He's not going to be like learning new styles and stuff. He's not going to be changing how he fights. I don't think he's going to develop some killer instinct out of nowhere. Usually fighters have it or they don't.